Welcome to the show, Dr. Jacoby. I'm really excited to speak with you today, and I want to start off by learning more about you and your journey and what got you into podiatry and eventually writing the book Sugar Crush.
Well, I kiddingly say I flunked knees. People ask me that all the time. I had a friend in college, and he was in podiatric medical school. I didn't know a lot about it. And this is the true story behind that. And it was Vietnam War days. I was in college. And I said, why did you go into that? And he said, well, his father was a podiatrist. And you get a deferment. I said, a what? And he said, a deferment from the military. I said, sign me up. So I was, I think, a junior at that time. So I really stepped up my education. When I graduated, I applied, but I went to graduate school at Villanova after college, really just to stay out of the war. I mean, it was a really difficult time at that time. And so I didn't know what I was getting into. And it was quite difficult. I got to tell you that. I thought it was overkill education wise. I mean, it was ridiculous. So I had these debates with myself. What, do you want to hold a rifle or do you want to hold a scalpel? I said, I think I'll go with the knife. So it kind of grew on me after a while. I had a good residency in Philadelphia. I met a lot of great people. And it was at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital, which was the first hospital in the United States, by the way, founded in 1751 by Benjamin Franklin. So I would eat lunch every day in his library. And it just took me over almost spiritually to start learning, because I was just having fun in college at the time. So I stepped it up. So I got to thank Ben Franklin.
How were you able to, after graduating from podiatry and practicing, when did you start making the connection between seeing patients with foot ailments to sugar, and then obviously leading you to write your book on sugar, which is called Sugar Crush?
Yeah, I really didn't make the connection, but looking back, there was all these little dots that I should have seen it earlier, but I did not, because I was young and invincible, as it looks like you are as well. But I was once young like you, and I was fortunate, and I had a work study program in podiatry at that time, and it was at the Ben Franklin Clinic, as a matter of fact, in Philadelphia, and it was with Dr. Michael Sheff, and he was a investigator from London. He worked with Watson and Crick on the DNA issue. And he was doing experiments on PKU, which is really a metabolic disease of birth. And I was his research assistant. So he taught biochemistry in Philadelphia. I was in his class. He's a world-class human being in terms of, I hate to say it this way, but he was a nerd that was really cool. Does that make sense? And I thought, I didn't think of myself as a nerd. I've become a nerd. But I was so amazed by his knowledge and his dedication and his work ethic. I really didn't have that work ethic for studying. And I thought I could just read it, answer the test question. No, these guys are world-class athletes in a way. And I was like, oh my God, they just eat, drink, and sleep this stuff. So that kind of got me motivated. I did my residency in Philadelphia, also great training, got to Arizona. I was actually the Phoenix Suns podiatrist when I first got here. And that was a great experience, because then I realized to be really good at what you do, and these athletes, I mean, everybody takes them for granted. Like they just walked on the court, throw a ball up, and it went through the basket. Hey, here's your job. No, this is a hugely, intensely competitive world they're in. And I was starting to get that same feeling. Wait, if you really want to get to the top of your craft, you got to really work hard. You could be talented, which I think I had some talent, but not like at that level. So I started reading and really applied myself. And the big issue that I had with diabetes, I was not living that life. I was starting to understand that sugar was the problem, but I went to the gym every day. I started the Scottsdale Healthcare Wound Care Center maybe 35 years ago. I treated lots of diabetics, amputation, et cetera, et cetera. And one day I had my gallbladder attack. I had gallbladder attack, and I was kind of shocked because I went to the gym every day, but I had absolutely no consciousness of diet, and I was like shocked. So I had my gallbladder out, and my family doctor friend, he was in the cafeteria at the hospital, and he said, "What happened to you?" And I said, "My gallbladder out." And he had a pile of food on his plate, and he was the next football player as well. So he was a big guy. And he said to me, which is funny, he said, "You don't eat enough. You don't eat breakfast. You got to exercise that gallbladder." And I went, "What?" And I thought, wow, maybe he's right. I never ate breakfast in my life. I just did surgery in the morning. So about noon, ate a big cafeteria breakfast or lunch, which was loaded with carbs. And then I started to think about this. Is my diet, is it wrong? And I was thinking about genetics. My mother had her gallbladder out. So I said, well, that's genetic, but why are so many gallbladders taken out? And then I ran into Dr. Dellon. This is the seminal moment, that epiphany that you kind of, if you're lucky, you run into this. And he was a professor of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. And he had a novel procedure to decompress nerves of the lower extremity. He invited me down to Johns Hopkins about 20 years ago. And he taught me this technique. And I was like, oh my God. And now I was back to, I know nothing. I mean, really, I remember saying to myself, I know nothing. Dellon is so far and above. It's like meeting Michael Jordan. You're playing in the NBA and you're a superstar. And you meet Michael Jordan and you realize you're nothing. It was one of those moments. And he said, read my textbook, which I did a couple times. And I really realized I didn't know anything. I thought I did, but I didn't. And then I did the surgery with him. And this is a seminal moment. He said, put these magnification glasses on, which we call loops in surgery, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And sure enough, there was the answer. And so I was very fortunate. I had the knowledge and the lens to look through Dellon's lens and see that diabetic neuropathy is a compression neuropathy that's caused by sugar. And it's that simple. And then I really went in deep dive. I mean, now I'm obsessed. I really am with the subject. And I was kind of pissed off at myself for kind of wasting a lot of time. And now I met Michael Jordan. It really is. And I go, okay, this guy works super hard. He's got more talent than anybody, and he works harder than anybody. So of course he's going to be the best of the best. I wanted to be that person. So I went back and reread everything I could find. Met Dr. Cook at Stanford because I texted him and I said, Dr. Dellon has a theory. He had written an article in 2004 in Circulation Journal on what he called the Uber market for cardiovascular disease. And I thought it had something to do with the biochemistry of what Dellon was talking about. And he calls me on the phone 2 hours later. He said, I like your idea, come up to Stanford, which I did. I used his molecule, looked at my patients, and I started to get the connection of not only is diabetic neuropathy caused by sugar, but every nerve in the body is. There is no type 1 diabetes or type 2, or like Dr. Perlmutter likes to say, type 3 for dementia. No, they're all the same. They're just different labels on different diseases throughout the body. So that's my short version of my quest. Kind of long answer to the question, but that's what happened.
No, that's a great answer to the question, actually, because it really allows me to really understand your journey and how like you've gotten to this point in terms of your research and the work that you do and the teachings and the speakings that you conduct. So it's interesting because you're saying that and you realize that diabetic neuropathy sugar was the main cause, right? Which kind of sounds obvious because diabetes is linked with some sort of sugar dysregulation in your body, right? So that's obvious.
Correct.
But then you're saying that in going further down that rabbit hole, you realize that other diseases like Alzheimer's, and you even mentioned autism,
Yeah,
as well,
yeah, yeah.
can be traced back to sugar. Um, my question for you is, so do we take sugar completely out of our diet? How does sugar really affect the body?
That's a great question. That's a fundamental question. And that is not being asked in medicine at all. So let's start with that premise right there. So when I was in training, and here's another thing, when you're in training, when you're given a mountain of information, they don't care what your opinion is, even though I expressed it a few times and got shot down. So they're really saying, here's the body of knowledge we know, read it, regurgitate it, and if you do, you get a degree. In other words, shut up, which I did. Until you feel that after you get in practice, you apply what they told you, and then you start to question. But you are rewarded in medicine to follow the narrative. You're not rewarded to go outside the bounds. Actually, you're ridiculed. And some people really get angry with that approach. And that happened to me. So, but I kept on. And fortunately, I do like to read, and I can read rather quickly. And so I had the ability to really dive through the literature. And when I started to look at the biochemistry of nerves with Dr. Cook up at Stanford, then I realized that's another field I really, I knew biochemistry, but did I really know it? No, not at all. Not by his standard. Another guy who just made me feel like I knew nothing. I didn't, even though I had a lot of biochemistry. And but he's just one of those great people who would sit down with you and answer the questions that you asked him in a very simple, it never put me down. Okay. So we had great conversations like we're having now, one person to another, what's the answer to the question, and get his opinion. So then he told me that his molecule, which is called asymmetric dimethyl arginine. It sounds like a big word. It is a big word. But what does it really mean? It means that arginine, which is a semi-essential amino acid, which comes in two forms: symmetric, meaning the methyl group is on either side, or asymmetric on one side. So that's what it means. Two methyl groups on the side of arginine. Well, what's that mean? Well, that's a really simple, very fundamental problem. And that molecule converts to nitric oxide. And nitric oxide dilates the blood vessel, not just the blood vessels in the foot, but in the brain and every other organ system throughout the body. So it really is, you eat sugar, alters the arginine molecule, and you get vasoconstriction instead of vasodilation. That's the really fundamental portion. It affects the nerve. Which nerve? All nerves, but the autonomic nervous system, which you would not consider diabetes. You consider diabetes at the end stage when your sugars are elevated and your insulin is elevated. That's obvious. So I started to question myself, well, wait a minute. Is it really type 1 and type 2? And Dr. Perlmutter, he wants to say it's type 3 for dementia. What are we going to do? Have 1,500 different types? No, it's one cause. It's sugar. But which sugar? So then another guy, now I cheat a little bit on this. So I go to the best in the world, and I do read their papers, but I have the opportunity to ask them in a conversation style. And Don Johansson is that one person in anthropology. So I said, hey, Dr. Johnson, Johansson, you wrote a lot of papers. You were the discovery of Lucy, our first primate. So what's your opinion? What did Lucy eat? Well, why don't you come to a seminar in New York City at the Explorers Club? What did Lucy eat? Wow, that was a great lecture. A lot of nerds there, by the way, a lot of nerds. So I kind of got into my nerd costume, but they're really interesting people to be around. They're dedicated. They're in their own way, they're very, very funny and brilliant. And the question was, what did Lucy eat? Well, she, was the tree dweller in the beginning, if you accept that scenario. And then she morphed her way out of the tree from a herbivore to bugs, meat, fire. She changed her morphology into what we are today. So she really was a carnivore after she evolved, not in the beginning, but she evolved as a carnivore, and that's why we are human. So if we're carnivores and we were healthy, what happened? So about 10,000 years ago, the rich guy in the town, he said, hey, see that honey up in the tree there with all the bees around it? I want you to go up and get me some honey. Well, that's dangerous. Yeah, but I'm the king, right? So when people got money or power, they wanted sweet things and they wanted sugar. So the king was always fat when you really think about it, right? Throughout history, even Ben Franklin, he was too. And King Louis V, anybody had money wanted sugar. But the poor people did not have sugar because it's too expensive. So the poor people really didn't have disease. So if you look back after Columbus, quote unquote, discovered America, really got the maps from the Portuguese, he knew where this sugar was coming from. And here we are as Americans, founded on sugar and destroying America with sugar. So now the price of sugar started to go down. It was equivalent in the 1600s, about $1,000 in England. So who do you think ate sugar? The rich. Who do you think got sick? The rich. Who do you think had doctors? Well, only the rich, because they're the only ones really sick. And that's how we started the medical profession, with herbs and things like this, and then metformin. And now it's the whole country is just filled with pharmaceuticals. And in my opinion, only to allow you to eat more sugar. That's all those drugs are. It's that simple. But if you want to be profitable, you're going to make a monoclonal antibody drug that costs $200,000 a year. And that's how you monetize a disease. So it is sugar, but here's the fundamental sugar. So table sugar, which is still interests me today. So sucrose is the table sugar, and that's considered a disaccharide. And what that means is two sugars put together. So we have glucose and fructose. Now, the interesting part is glucose is a horrible taste. You cannot eat it. So you couldn't eat it if you wanted to. So nature has made that as a poison. But in the springtime, when after the hard winter, you come out of the cave, the berries are growing, fructose, and you're gobbling down fructose. Why? Because you want to put weight back on, like a bear. That's after hibernation. Bear is eating as much sugar as it can in the form of fructose to make fat. That's what it does. But when the fruit goes away, you don't go out and keep eating glucose. You can't, because it's disgusting. So biochemically, the glucose is coming into your body, raising your insulin to produce a storage of visceral fat. Whereas the fructose goes through the liver, makes the liver fat, but the key ingredient there is leptin. It turns off that switch that says, I'm full. Well, you're never full when you're eating fructose. You just keep eating. And that's why, back to the obesity epidemic, I know it's mean to fat shame, which it is, because really those people who are overweight cannot stop. They don't have any leptin in their system. And so they cannot stop. So you say this, but why don't you stop eating sugar? And the answer is they can't, because it's now in the form of high fructose corn syrup, which is a liquid poison. It's in everything. So I try to make a good case that sugar's the answer. Doesn't matter if it's called Alzheimer's, different nerves. Alzheimer's, the olfactory nerve. NFL, very good example. NFL is 400% higher incidence of ALS. Well, let's see. Are football players 350 pounds? Yes. Do they have a lot of trauma to their neck? Yes. And my formula is sugar plus trauma equals nerve dysfunction. So that nerve, the glossopharyngeal nerve, is being traumatized on a nerve that's already full of sugar. And that's why the NFL players, 400% higher incidence of A, in Latin mean amyotrophic, mean no muscle function on either side of the neck. And if you can't do that, you can't swallow, and your lungs fill up with fluid and you die. They're very, it's a horrible disease. Somebody just in the news, Sandra Bullock, her husband died of ALS. Of course, it's horrible. So all the money spent in medicine is trying to find, quote unquote, the cure. And I understand that. Find a drug so you can keep eating sugar. Wouldn't it be just simpler? No, don't eat it in the first. Well, I know why, because it tastes so goddamn good. It's addicting. And that's why we have the problem we have here in the United States and all over the world now.
Yeah. Wow. You said so much, right? You talked about how sugar is really killing us as a society, especially in America. And then you talked about the different types of sugar, fructose and glucose, right? So my question is, I think realistically, I think most people would love to say, I'm never going to eat sugar again, right? But then you have people who are hypoglycemic, who have like low blood sugar, and they need sugar in their system to kind of stabilize themselves. And then on top of that too, people want to go out and have a good time. And even if they're not eating sugar, they might be eating bread, which turns into glucose or some sort of sugar into in their blood. So the first question, before we kind of go down a rabbit hole about why they're feeding us so much sugar, we know why. They want to keep us sick so they can continue to make profit off of us. At least that's what I think, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Correct.
Okay.
You're absolutely correct.
Okay.
There's no question about it.
Yes, there's no question about it. That's very obvious. But my question for you is, when it comes to the different types of sugars, there's some people out there and some companies out there that create sweeteners, right? Like allulose, for example, is a different form of sugar that's supposed to be healthier. I just want to hear your thoughts on, is there a right type of sugar that is good for your body that you're supposed to have? Because obviously fruits, for example, have sugar in them. Like if I eat an apple or a mango or banana. So are there good types of sugar that are okay to have versus other types of sugar? Or if possible, we should just kind of cut out sugar completely?
And the short answer is every sugar is a poison.
Even the sweeteners and the alternative sugars.
Oh yeah, they're even more seductive because they're really sugar molecules have been chemically altered. And it gives you an illusion you're not eating quote unquote sugar. But anything that causes a insulin response is going to turn into fat. That's the problem. So cardiovascular disease, neurologic disease, actually every disease that you hear about that's the true cause. Now, why do some people get, like me, a gallbladder attack? And by the way, that was 25, 30 years ago. If you asked me how was my diet, I would say it was great. I ate what I wanted to. I went to the gym every day of my life. Really, I like lifting weights.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of shocked when that happened to me. Then I said, well, my mother had her gallbladder out. Must be genetic, right? So now I'm going, okay, so if I change my diet, would things change? Well, they do. But the concept of epigenetics, that was not known back then, or it was known actually, but I didn't know it. So I started to study epigenetics. Well, that's the answer. Let's say you have two genes that could express for gallbladder disease, and I have 10, they're called alleles above the genome. So you eat sugar, I don't see the problem, Dr. Jacoby. It doesn't bother me. I eat that same thing. I have gallbladder disease. However, you may be carrying genes that express for MS. So you don't get my disease, you get another quote unquote disease. That in my new book, Unglued, I'm trying to articulate this better. So you go to your doctor, you got some numbness and tingling in your feet. That could be diabetic neuropathy, could be MS. Well, what is MS? This was described by Charcot in the 1860s in France. He saw patients who, and by the way, then it was syphilis, number one. So this smart guy, he could tell the difference between these two. He had this patient who had numbness and tingling, and at the autopsy, he saw these white spots in the brain and in the cervical spine. Well, those white spots are really the effect of sugar, in my opinion. And we call them different names, tangles and Dow formation. They're really inflammatory fibrosis. Sugar causes inflammation, body heals by fibrosis, scarring. That's all it is. But he named it multiple areas of sclerosis, just like ALS. That word sclerosis, atherosclerosis. They were naming these things in the 1800s, for the most part, observations of where this process was having, and where it affected. So they got all these different names. And Alzheimer's, which is a big one today, started to see that in the early 1900s, did not exist at all because people weren't really eating that much sugar and they didn't live that long. So now that process was going on. He knows people that had lost their memory. Now he gave it a name, his name. Well, that's not a disease. To me, that's an observation. So the whole nomenclature in medicine is wrong, because it gives you the impression you have a diagnosis. No, you just described where the accident happened. Out here, like we have the 101 as our main highway, and it happened up north. We call it North 101 disease and South 101 disease, like it's a different disease. No, it's different location, the same process. But Big Pharma loves that because they're going to get research money and they're going to solve that particular itis. So you put epigenetics, you put the chemistry together, and you look at these things, as I always say, through Dr. Dellen's lens, and actually see this at surgery and go, wait a minute, we're looking inside the body and we're seeing that. So my new book, Unglued. Oh, by the way, I'm going to put you on the spot, because I was put on the spot, and I like the faces of people when I ask this. So I'm giving this lecture in California, and actually in Hollywood. So we got all the Hollywood types around me. So a guy says to me, you say glucose and sugars and all that. What does the word glucose mean? And I give him the answer I just gave you, the biochemistry. He said, no, what's the word mean? I mean, really shouting at me. What's the word mean? What's it? I said, I don't know. I never looked it up. So I'm asking you that question. What does it mean?
I just thought glucose was sugar. Like, in talking to you now, I didn't even realize, I guess I subconsciously knew there were different types of sugar,
Uh-huh.
but glucose is the most popular one that we hear all the time, like, oh, you have too much glucose in your blood and all of that stuff. So I just thought glucose was synonymous to sugar, but I've never looked up what glucose actually means.
That you're just like me. So here's
So,
the answer. Here's
okay.
the answer. Okay. I think it's kind of interesting and fun answer. So I looked it up. It's a Greek word. It came into use in the 1800s, by the way, but the root word means sticky,
Mm.
adherent. It's glue,
Ooh.
hence
Mm.
the word glucose. So it's really a sticky sugar. So it sticks to your blood vessels, it sticks to everything. It's a poison. It's actually a poison, this glue.
Oh,
So you
wow.
would, as I said, it's not sweet, so you wouldn't eat it. So you hook it up with fructose, and you're tasting the fructose, which does not spike your insulin, but you're not knowing you're eating all this glucose, which is poison. Anything more than a teaspoon a day is poison.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, gee, little podiatrist from Philly figured this out. Why are we not being told this? That's a fundamental question, like I just asked you and I was asked. I did not know. I think if human beings were asked that question, they would understand they're eating poison, but they're addicted to fructose. So it comes right with it. That's why it's so the combination of the two is called sucrose.
So where do you get, okay, so what types of foods have fructose in them and what types of foods have glucose in them? Or does fructose turn into glucose in the blood?
Good question. So high fructose corn syrup is really the liquid form of fructose and glucose.
Okay.
So they can put that in. I like to say that I don't know what kind of chair you're sitting in, but if you added high fructose corn syrup to it, you ate your chair, you would be addicted to eating chairs. It really, because it's so delicious, it doesn't matter what you put it in. So that's the addiction portion. And people go crazy if they can't get their fix, which is really gateway drug when you think about it. And some people are affected more than others.
Yeah.
And you wonder, why can you not stop eating that? And I get that. So many people are overweight. They're trying to say, no, that's a normal. Well, it's normal in the United States, but it's not normal. It's abnormal. But it doesn't equate that every overweight person has disease. But if you take intersect the two, it's about 85% correlation. Okay.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because obviously there's sugar everywhere, right?
Every,
Like you cannot escape sugar, especially if you live in the United States. There's sugar. Like when I go to the store and I'm trying to get a can of a jar of tomato sauce for pasta. Why is there sugar in tomato sauce, for example? But to your point about, obesity being an issue in America, when I travel abroad, right, I see a lot of people who aren't as overweight. Like it's not a chronic problem overseas, but they're not necessarily eating things that are different from what we eat in the United States in terms of cakes and breads. And, a lot of these cultures are very carb heavy, right? Like we've demonized carbs in our world today. Like, oh, if you eat carbs, it's so bad for you. But when you travel abroad, like a lot of people are eating carbs, a lot of people are eating what you might consider sugary snacks, but the difference is that they just have better ingredients that they're using, I guess, that are not as addictive for people who are living over there. So I guess my question again still um is all sugar, we talked about like minimizing sugar, and that's also very, very important, but we also need sugar in our blood to some extent. Like if we were to completely take sugar out of our diet, and our body wasn't, producing any sort of glucose or the right chemistry for the sugar when it hits our blood, wouldn't that still be detrimental to us as well?
No.
No?
No. So
Okay.
you have let's then unpack those observations, which are good because I had the same observations in Europe, Italy. When you go to Italy, have you
Yeah,
been there?
exactly.
That's a good example. They drink all day long. They eat a lot of pasta. They don't have, however, they don't have genetically modified grain. That's probably a big part of it.
Mm.
And they don't have a lot of high fructose corn syrup laced in their food. So GMOs, genetically modified foods, which is made by Monsanto, they don't let that in their country.
Yeah.
Because they know it's poison.
Yeah.
So glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in that herbicide Roundup, they don't let it in. So they don't have the problems. This war, by the way, in Ukraine is kind of an interesting sidebar to that story, because that's the breadbasket of Europe. John Deere and Monsanto, and I have the document, literally 2 weeks before Putin invaded, they were offered Ukraine almost $15 billion to get genetically modified food into Ukraine. And Putin said no. You'd never hear about that. So he's very much against genetically modified, number one. And the second issue, the biologic, what you call them, laboratories in Ukraine. So that's kind of a sidebar, not just to the diet, but to stem cells, because they were using embryonic stem cells. So my new book, by the way, which is called Unglued, because the glue is the
Glucose.
glue.
Yeah.
So I'm answering a couple different questions here. Number one, they don't have genetically modified foods in Europe. They are thinner. They eat more pasta than we do. If we ate the way they ate, we my God, we would just keep gaining more and more weight. But they don't have high fructose corn syrup there. They have sugar, yes, and they do have carbohydrates, which do turn into sugar. So let me just break that down. Let you ask me, if you had no sugar whatsoever, how would you get the glucose to run your brain? Because that's what it uses, glucose. That's where the paradox is. Well, there's a process called gluconeogenesis. What that word means is making glucose out of nothing, so to speak. So it will use what's available and take proteins or fat and change it into glucose chemically in your body as you need it. And you only need 1 teaspoon, which is 4 grams at any one time. So I looked at a bunch of diets, because I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist. I'm a surgeon. I mean, it's kind of, that's why you're getting such a different answer that everybody else gives. So I wondered about that. So I looked at the Eskimo population, and I mean, people who lived in the Arctic, who didn't have any contact with civilization. They ate blubber, which is fat. They didn't have any gardens. They weren't no vegetarians there for sure. Kind of boring when you think about it, sitting on an iceberg. That's all you have to eat. You can imagine when they get to town and they found the Western diet. That's why their diabetes is through the roof, because they tasted sugar and oh my God, then they're sick. But their natural environment, no, they're very healthy, never get sick. Another group was the Maasai warriors in Africa. So they're lean and mean naturally. What's their diet? They eat blood. They use, like the Mongols in China too, they eat blood and dairy. They don't even eat the meat. They give that to their dogs. They don't even consider that food. They have no disease, very strong, very tall, and they live off the land. Then another group I looked at, and they were trappers in Canada. and they got stranded in Canada because of this really severe winter. And they came to get them, and they were all dead. And they did autopsies, and they actually died of malnutrition. Why? Because the only thing they could eat for the winter was rabbits. Rabbits have no fat. So they were eating rabbit meat, a lot of protein, and their kidneys shut down. So eating just protein, dangerous. Eating just sugar, carbohydrates, dangerous. Eating fat, perfect meal. Now, but we live in society. Can you imagine trying to do that every day? Well, we're not going to do it.
Yes.
Okay. So I think a carnivore diet is a good diet too. If you have what I call an itis, whatever it is, a rash, irritable bowel, whatever, just go off the standard American diet. Just eat meat for 30 days if you can, which is just meat and really eating fat. Now, the true carnivore diet is eating organ meat. Food is what makes us sick, and the sugar in it and the additives and whatever. So can you survive without all that stuff? Yes, you can. And I think you can have a diverse diet. So I'm kind of a keto diet. I really don't eat desserts. I don't eat sugar. Alcohol is an issue. Alcohol is a sugar. I do like wine, but that's sugar. So what I say to my patients, don't waste your energy on eating really lousy food. I mean, like Cheerios for breakfast or Quaker Oats. I mean, that is just poison. And certainly don't snack on whatever during the day. Try to be as keto as you can. And then if you want to drink at night, well, get a drink that's, actually vodka, it surprised me, it's on the ketogenic diet because it really doesn't have that impact on your insulin, which surprised me. So, I mean, you got to live. Keto is probably Mediterranean. I know. Now, here's another distinction: women versus men. I think women are more adapted biologically and genetically to eat more of a vegetarian diet, but men really, they can't. Physiologically, they need that B12 that you only can get from meat. And so I'm a carnivore when it comes to that. Of course, we're all omnivores. We can eat anything, but to really feel good, I gotta have red meat. I gotta have it.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting because there's so many rules of thought when it comes to diet, right? Like depending on who you talk to, people swear by the keto diet, right? And I have tried that before, and it was good, but it wasn't something I could sustain in like an everyday lifestyle. And then second of all, there's this whole movement about veganism and alternative meats and cutting out meat from your diet, or being vegetarian, right? So and they're talking about vegetarianism or veganism as a way of reversing a lot of the diseases and autoimmune disorders that we've talked about, right? And there's so many people that swear by it that say, oh, once I became vegan, my back stopped hurting me, my autoimmune disorder went away. So it's like all of these different diets that I guess could that are healthier. And I actually thought you were gonna promote a more vegan-ish based diet, right? With a lot of like food that grows from the earth rather than like the processed foods. So it's interesting to see that you're saying that keto, a higher fat diet actually works long term better than the other diets.
It really does, because there's a neurosurgeon out of Australia. I think his name is Chaffee, and he has a really good podcast and video. and he says, vegetables are out to kill you. He's a
Really?
carnivore. Yeah. And there's a lot of excellent papers on this. So think of the plant world and the animal world.
Mm-hmm.
Animals can move away from danger. Plants cannot. So they have protective mechanism, like poison ivy. You step on it, you're going to get a rash. But a lot of these foods we eat change inside the intestinal tract, and they're going to make you miserable, irritable bowel. That's really what it means. So in my practice, I only can tell you what I see is patients. Women tend to be vegetarians for the most part. And when they get off of that, most of those inflammatory conditions go away. So what I say, I'm like I say, I'm not a nutritionist. I don't want to be a nutritionist. It's too complicated for me. So I like to break things down very simply. If you think your diet is good and you're here seeing me, then maybe it's not, whatever it might be. So I say, just eliminate something. Go carnivore for a couple of weeks if you can, and see what happens. You'd be amazed how many people come back and say, all, rheumatoid arthritis, all these different things, and they go away. They really do.
Yeah.
And then you add things back in that you just want to have, and if it bothers you, then don't eat it.
Yeah.
And it's really that simple. Now, being a carnivore or a keto, kind of boring when you think
It
about
is.
it. It is kind of boring. And but in my book, Sugar Crush, they wanted me to have a diet. I was like, oh my God, what am I
Yeah.
going to tell you? Eat 2 peanuts and not an almond and keep a diary. No, don't eat the sugar. You'll get better. So in my new book, I know these people are not going to change. I'm going to tell them what's causing their disease. But my new book is really about stem cells. Stem cells fix anything. And hopefully I can get this book out in the next couple of weeks. But the FDA is changing the rules. They're making, let's go back to Lucy. They're saying that amniotic fluid, which is the water in a pregnancy that surrounds the baby, is now a drug.
What?
After 3 million years, I think Lucy's going to be pissed that Lucy actually was a drug dealer. and every pregnant woman apparently is a drug mule, if that is true. Think about it.
Because it has a lot of stem cells in it.
Oh, yeah. It's bathed in it. And you inject that stuff, you can cure just about anything. Oh, I'm not allowed to say that. FDA says you can't say that. Oh, yeah, because it's a drug. So you're going to be in a new drug trial.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars, take 10 years. In the meantime, we got every disease from Alzheimer's to autism. People are dying. COVID is strictly, in my opinion, you can read it on page 25, the biochemistry of it. Viruses love sugar, and they're going to kill anybody who has high levels of sugar in their body. And the statistic, 97% of the people that had COVID that died in the hospital had elevated levels of ADMA. That's what I talked about in my book, Sugar Crush. That's the chemical. And you can't exchange oxygen. Go off of sugar, viruses leave because there's no sugar. They go to the next guy who has sugar. They attack them. So my message is,
reduce your sugar intake.
Yeah,
or cut it out completely.
How do you have fun around? Because meals are fun.
Yeah,
we go to restaurants as our socialization. It's fun. So, but don't kill yourself going there.
Don't overdo it. Yeah, it's funny. You've given us so much to think about today because, there are a lot of people in your world, in the medical profession. Sugar is a big thing when it comes to diet and how it wreaks havoc in the body. But there's been a lot of studies coming out now that kind of talk about how mental and emotional health is also directly correlated with certain ailments that people have. And I just wonder if you ventured into that topic a little bit, and what are your thoughts on how stress could also be a contributing factor to a lot of these chronic illnesses?
Well, I think it does. I guess we have to define stress. Um, we certainly are living in a very stressful environment. You would think with all these new electronic devices would made it easier, but it actually hasn't. Um, I do think a lot of people are sitting around more than they used to, maybe because of the electronics, and they're eating a bad diet. They're not getting outside. They're not getting sunshine. They're not getting vitamin D, and they're not socializing as much as we did, or at least I did when I grew up. You're a lot younger than I am, and we didn't have these devices, so I guess you had to socialize. I mean, you would play with your kids' neighbors. I remember my mother used to say, and I was like 9 or 10 years old, basically was dinner's at 5. That's all she said to me. In other words, if I made it back at 5 o'clock, there was dinner. If I didn't get it. I mean, it was not that was the rule. She never asked me where I went during the day, and I'm glad she never did, because it was, I went everywhere throughout Philadelphia. Now, I mean, you can't let kids out in the street. They can't socialize the way we used to, and they're sitting at home playing video games. And I do think, well, even like the electromagnetic fields of phones, EMF. That's a whole other topic, because I did discuss that in Sugar Crush a little bit.
Yeah.
So the answer to the question, sugar plus trauma and EMF is a trauma, an electromagnetic field, and we're swimming in that in our environment.
I think there's so many other questions I could ask you, because this is just not a 1 hour conversation. This is like a 10-hour conversation. But you've given me so much to think about, and I'm sure my listeners are going to really, really enjoy this conversation and kind of think for themselves how much sugar they probably have, they consume, and how it affects their health, and so on and so forth. But this episode, I mean, this podcast is called A Word to the Wise. And before I let you go, I always ask for final words of wisdom to the listeners. And it could be about what we've been talking about, or just some other type of topic that you kind of keep in your back pocket as you go through life.
Well, you can tell I'm kind of obsessed with this issue, but I give you one little factoid that helps with that, reading labels, looking for sugar.
Mm.
So you divide 4 into total carbohydrates on the label. Forget about added sugar and all that stuff. Divide 4 into that number. Let's say it's 24 carbohydrate grams, and that will give you number 6. That means teaspoons. 6 teaspoons of sugar in whatever that package is. And that gives you a visual. Would you put 6 teaspoons of sugar like into yogurt? That's how much there is in there. Actually,
Yeah.
more sugar in that than there is in a candy bar. So I kind of tell people, if you want a candy bar, you got to have that sugar. Eat a candy bar. Don't torture yourself by pretending by eating yogurt you really want the sugar. Go for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So that's
Your words of wisdom.
Where's the wisdom? Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm gonna start doing that now, because the sugar epidemic in this country is ridiculous. But thank you, Dr. Jacoby, for stopping by the podcast. It's been so wonderful speaking with you.
Oh, it's lovely.